their video on or their audio on past this point is consenting to have their video posted to the East Kingdom YouTube page and shared for the future. We are all set. Thank you so much, and I'll turn it back to you.
All right. So yeah, V. V and U are essentially the same letter. W, U. If you take the word victory, as we would say Victoria in English, but pretend there's a U at the beginning instead of a V, and you would say Victoria. Kind of makes sense, I hope. The letter W doesn't exist. You can safely pretend like it's not there. And Y is generally only found in words of Greek origin. There was, of course, a lot of cultural meshing and sharing between Greece and Italy. So sometimes you'll see Y, pronounce it as if it was an I. It should say E. If you guys have any questions and you don't want to have your video or audio on, feel free to just type it in the chat. I will keep checking back on that. Yeah.
I do have a question, a quick question. Are you going
Absolutely.
to be having these slides available where we can somehow print them out so we can practice and learn on our own too?
Yes, I will. At the end of this, I will post a shareable link. So this presentation is also going to be your handout, so you can have that link and refer to it whenever you so please.
Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Any questions about pronunciation or letters? I realize I talk fast sometimes, so if you do need me to slow down, I will endeavor to do so. But it sounds like we're good on that pronunciation. So I heard a breath.
Oh, I just had another quick question.
Absolutely.
The J.
Yes.
You said that there was no J in Latin.
Yeah.
Then how would Julius Caesar's name have been?
Julius.
Done. Julius. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, J and I you can essentially treat as if they were both an I. That I in Julius is a consonantal I. So in later texts, places where you'll see a consonantal I, like in the word Julius, the word for justice, the word for breakfast, those all have a consonantal I. So in classical Latin, you would pronounce it as if it was an I. In later medieval and Renaissance Latin, you might pronounce it with a J.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, what is Latin? A language, of course. Latin is a heavily inflected Indo-European language. And you may ask, well, Fortunata, what is an inflected language? And the answer is that an inflected language is a language wherein the spelling and form of words change depending on their use in a sentence. If people are familiar with, say, Spanish, French, German, Portuguese, Greek, those are all languages with some amount of inflection. English has largely lost its inflection. The only sort of real place we have it is in our pronouns. I, me, my, he, him, his, she, her, hers, things like that. So if a word changes in spelling and form depending on its use in the sentence, what does that mean for word order? And the answer is that Latin doesn't use syntax or word order the way we understand it in English. It can be best described as wibbly-wobbly. And if you don't understand, that's okay, because we're about to get into some examples. English as a language relies heavily on word order to convey meaning. You might say something like, I gave him the book. This is a grammatically correct sentence. You have the subject, I, the verb, gave, and the object, the book. And you could use Yoda speak and say, the book to him gave I. It's intelligible, but it's a grammatically incorrect sentence. You have the object, then the verb, then the subject. We can understand it because most of us know who Yoda is and we sort of get that idea. But technically that second sentence is grammatically incorrect. And in Latin, with our wibbly-wobbly word order, and best described as the points are made up, or the rules are made up and the points don't matter, whose line it is anyway joke, because you can say, donavi librum ei, that's a grammatically correct sentence. You can say librum ei donavi, that's also a grammatically correct sentence. You can say ei donavi librum, likewise a grammatically correct sentence. They all mean I gave him the book. Word order, it's we don't really do that in Latin. You can use it to some effect. Depending on where you put the verb, you can make emphasis, but ultimately syntax, word order doesn't matter. So we have nouns. Nouns, this is how you figure out where your subject is, because nouns are usually the subject. Nouns and adjectives, but we're talking about nouns, have three major characteristics, which is how you can identify them, or things that you understand about them. They have case, which is how the noun is used in the sentence. You can think of this sort of as the clothes that a noun puts on to perform different jobs. You're not going to want to wear the same outfit if you're going to a fancy party or if you're going to go hiking in the woods. Think of that kind of like case. They're the clothes that the noun puts on to show what it's doing at any given time. Nouns also have number, whether it's singular or plural. Is there one cat or are there many cats? Nouns also have gender. This is, in Latin, we have three genders, masculine, feminine, or neuter. This is grammatical gender. It has nothing to do with gender identity. It's largely arbitrary, an inherent concept. It's applied to nouns. The most useful thing it comes to is explaining how to match adjectives with their nouns. So if you want to say something is beautiful or tall or stinky or anything like that, those are adjectives that can modify a noun. And so as an example, we have three words here, largely sort of related. Terminus, which is a masculine word. Via, road or way, it's a feminine word. And iter, or journey, which is a neuter word. If you wanted to say, that's a beautiful border, or a beautiful road, or a beautiful journey, while technically it is still the same adjective, adjectives have come in different forms, so you have to use a masculine adjective to modify a masculine noun. You have to use a feminine adjective to modify a feminine noun, a neuter adjective to modify a neuter noun. Or adjectives, rather, any dictionary definition will show you the different forms of the adjectives. So if you're looking one up, you can select the correct one to modify your nouns. We'll talk about case, for example. Latin has 5 cases. They all do many different things. The nominative case, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. How do I go back? There we go. The nominative case is usually the subject. It's typically translated as a, an, or the noun. Latin doesn't use articles. It's all contextual. So it is up to the translator to decide what article is supposed to be there. The genitive indicates possession. It's usually translated as of the noun or nouns. The dative is used for the indirect object. It's usually translated as to or for. The to or for noun. The accusative case is used for the direct object. Direct object is the thing being acted upon. In our example of I gave him the book is, or no, him is the direct object. No, is the indirect object. I'm confusing myself. Him is the indirect object. The book is the direct object because the book is being acted upon. Good evening. And then the ablative case is probably the most unusual. It holds a lot of different things that it can do, but mostly sort of in its basic sense, it notes accompaniment, instrumentation, and a whole bunch of prepositional phrases. It's usually translated as by, with, or from. I went with my friend to the store. That would be an ablative of accompaniment. Or I killed him with a sword is an ablative of instrumentation. But again, all those articles of, to, for, by, with, from, that's all contextual. And as you get the hang, if you decide to continue your Latin studies, as you get the hang of how the language works, you get a feel for how to translate what when. Any questions?
What is the difference between direct object and subject? Because they're both a, an, and the with
Yes.
the noun. So how do you know which it is if we're trying to translate or read it?
Sure. So in Latin itself, they'll have different forms. So they'll have different endings that will, again, as you learn it, you get used to which one is which.
Kind of like Spanish?
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, in English? English,
kind of like Spanish has the different endings depending on if it's me, you, we, they.
That's a verb thing.
Oh, okay.
But it is a similar idea. Basically, the subject is usually the one who is doing the verb, whereas the direct object is the thing being acted upon.
Okay.
So if we say, I kicked the ball, I'm the subject because I'm doing the kicking. The ball is the direct object because it's the thing being acted upon, it's being kicked.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yes.
Great. 5 cases. There are actually 2 other cases, but they are fairly rare. The vocative, which is when you're talking to someone directly, and the locative, which has to do with location. They are fairly rare. I wouldn't worry about them too much. It's a little more advanced than we're going to get into here because this is a crash course introduction. We have cases. And how do we know what form of the word to use? We have these cases. We know we want to say this is the subject and this is the object, or that book belongs to my friend over there. We have these things called declensions. All nouns fall into one of 5 groupings called declensions. A declension each declension follows a different pattern of case endings that will inform you so you can recognize each form of the word. Say, oh, this word falls into this declension and it has this ending, which means it's that case. Declensions are why the plural of cactus is cacti, the plural of alumna is alumni, and the plural of apparatus is surprise, apparatus. A lot of people don't realize that apparatus is 4th declension. Oh no, I just realized something about pronunciation that I forgot. I apologize to everyone for that. Wow, I'm okay. I'm going to circle back to pronunciation for 1 second and add it into this presentation as soon as we're done here. I can't believe I forgot this. Latin has diphthongs, which are 2 vowels smushed together that create one sound that is not the same as the sounds of those 2 vowels. The most common one is A and E together, which says I, like at the end of alumni there. Also in my name, Aelia. You also see sometimes O and E together, that says oi. Often seen in the word for battle, which is proelium, or yeah, that's the major one that I can think of. You learn to talk about wars really early on when you study Latin. Fun fact of the day. I apologize for that digression, but I felt that it required mentioning. Back to declension. Declensions tell you different patterns for what cases your nouns are going to use. Most dictionaries, however, will not tell you what declension a noun is. Instead, as you get used to, it, declensions can be determined by looking at the genitive case endings, because the nominative case endings are sometimes very similar, but the genitive ones are all different depending on the declension. So if you know what the genitive case ending is, you can figure out what declension it belongs to. It comes with practice. Usually you start with the first 2 declensions because there are a lot of words that fall into those. You get used to those patterns and you'll hop into the 3rd declension, which is probably the bulk of Latin words. And the fourth and fifth declensions are less common and a little weirder, but you usually don't get into them until you start hitting like the end of Latin 1, beginning of Latin 2. And then these are our examples, are 5 declensions with the nominative and genitive case endings. So for first declension nouns like alumna, your nominative case ending is going to be A, and your genitive case ending is going to be I. So the genitive of alumna, so of the alumna, would also be alumni. Second declension will end in US, R, or UM, and the genitive will end in I. So cactus is a second declension noun, so the cactus of the cactus would be cacti. The third declension doesn't have a nominative case ending. It can be pretty much anything, which is why it's a little bit unusual. But the genitive case ending is always going to be is. And there's an example after this. Fourth declension is the one that apparatus falls into, and that's US, US. Fifth declension comes into words like thing and day, race or dies, and then the genitive of that, of the thing or of the day, would be rei or die. Checking back. Thanks, Brock. So this is an example dictionary entry. This is from the Perseus project, which is done through Tufts University. It is a wonderful classics resource for both Latin and Greek. And our word of the day here is magistra, which is mistress. If you know any laurels or pelicans who use Latin titles, you might hear them called magistra. So you see magistra, magistri. So we could refer to our genitive list up above on the last slide and say, okay, that's a first declension noun. You can see with the F next to it that it's feminine, and a whole bunch of ways that the word could be used. This is just an example. I don't expect you to remember these things. Again, this is a crash course. And we have some declension examples. On the left, we have the word for star, stella, and on the right, the word for sun, sol. Now, sol is an interesting and unusual example. It's a third declension noun, so it doesn't have a standard nominative case ending. But as you can see, the rest of the case endings in the singular and plural, Latin's a really regular language, guys. If you like chanting endings to yourself and wanting to sound kind of weird and ominous, chanting things in Latin is great. Even if it's just case endings, it's a good time. I am gonna continue to poke at that chat. Chat's good. Any questions on nouns so far? I guess not. That's good. That makes me happy. Because then we're going to move on to verbs. They're what you do. And in comparison to nouns, verbs have a lot more moving parts. But as I'm sorry, I missed the name of the gentleman who was talking about Spanish and how you have the different endings for the different, for I, you, he, she, it, we, you, they. Latin has that too. Because whereas nouns have 3 characteristics, remember our case, number, and gender, verbs have 5 characteristics. So it can be a little confusing. Again, it's very regular. Verbs have a person. Who is doing the action or the subject of the verb? Is it me? Is it you? Is it all of us? That's the person, first, second, or third person. As number, how many people are doing the action? Is it just one person, or is it a bunch of people? Or things, or ideas, what have you? You have tense, which is when the action is taking place. Is it taking place now? Did it take place already? Is it going to take place in the future? tense. You have mood, which is the way you indicate the action of the verb. I'm going to go into mood a little bit later. You also have voice, which is whether the subject is doing or receiving the action. Passive voice is a thing we tend to avoid in English. I learned about the passive voice in Latin class before I learned about it in English class, and I told one of my English teachers in high school that she could pry the passive voice from my cold dead hands. Because we like the passive voice in Latin. So, person, number, these make sense. When does the verb take place? Tense. Latin has 6 tenses. The present tense, I am doing it or I do it. It's taking place now. You have the future tense, I will be doing it at some point in the future. You have the perfect tense, I did it, with the sort of side understanding that that thing is completed, which is why it's called the perfect tense, perfect as in it's finished. You have the pluperfect tense, I had done it, with the understanding that it is incomplete, repetitive, habitual, or ongoing. The imperfect, I was doing it, and the future perfect, I will have done it. Mood, of course, is not just how you feel. Latin has 3 moods. It's the way you express the action of the verb. You have the indicative, which expresses facts. You have the, we are Latin scholars, because this is a fact. We are studying Latin now. We are Latin scholars. You have the imperative, which expresses commands. Be a Latin scholar. Do the thing. Commands. You have the subjunctive, which can express wishes, possibilities, or potential. And with examples of, it was suggested that we become Latin scholars, or if I were a Latin scholar, I could teach this class. Perfect is the tense for homework. So yeah, mood. A lot of things you will find are either in the indicative or the subjunctive. Subjunctive you don't get into until Latin 2. I would not worry about it too much because we can mostly just talk about facts for right now. Do you decline verbs also? The answer is not exactly. In the same way that nouns have declensions, which give us paradigm patterns for how the words change, verbs have conjugations. There are 4 conjugations in Latin, each with their own patterns for the different characteristics of each verb, much in the same way that each declension has different patterns for the characteristics of a noun. Also, again, like a noun, Latin dictionaries don't always list what conjugation the verb belongs to. Instead, it'll list the 4 principal parts. Typically, it's the infinitive, which is the second principal part that allows the person reading to know what conjugation it belongs to. Again, knowing which one belongs to which comes with practice. You get used to the thing until it just becomes rote. And here we have an example. Our noun is to love or to be fond of. This first one is the first person singular present active indicative, which is I love. The second form next to it is the infinitive, to love. The third form is the first person singular perfect active indicative, I loved. And the last one there is the perfect passive participle, having been loved. So it's that second one there, the infinitive, that will end up telling you what conjugation it is. This particular online dictionary, latindictionary.net, tells you the conjugations and the declensions of the words you're looking at, which is pretty nifty and pretty useful until you get used to it. Any questions so far? Guess not. And then we have some sample conjugation charts. On the left-hand side, we have the present active subjunctive table for vivo, vivere, vixi, victus, to live, as a third conjugation verb. The first person, that I live or may I live, vivam. Vivas is you. Vivat or vivat. How many of us are familiar with that one? May he, she, or it live. Vivamus, we, vivatis, you all, and we want. May they live. As Latin scholar, it's a little bit frustrating when people are in court and you shout vivat for multiple people getting honored, because that's not how language works. But that's pet peeve. And then we're going to look at more loving. This is the future passive indicative table for amo, again, to love. I will be loved, you will be loved, he, she, or it will be loved, we will be loved, you all will be loved, they will be loved. There's that song, she will be loved. I'm distracting myself, I'm sorry. So these are examples. You get used to these things. Some of it, again, doesn't come up until Latin 2. In like a college or high school course. So again, baby steps, you get used to things. I have resources at the end here. So let's look at some examples. You can say Romanes eunt domus. No, don't say that. If any of you are fans of Monty Python's Life of Brian, then you will know that that is incorrect grammar. What do we want instead? We want Romani ite domum. Our first word there, Romani, is a second declension nominative plural. Romanos, Romani, it's a masculine noun. Because it's plural and nominative, or because it's nominative, we know it's the subject. This is about Romans. Because it's plural, we know that it is about more than one Roman. Ite is the plural present active infinitive to go. It's a command. It's an I said it's an infinitive. It's an imperative. Go. And then the verb to go, eo, ire, itus, which was a fun one when I learned because you can just say e. And then domum is a second declension, accusative singular. The construction there would be the accusative of place to which. Sounds real fancy. It isn't actually. It just means that you're indicating direction towards something. There are a lot of things in Latin, a lot of sort of phrases that sound really fancy until you realize just what it's supposed to be saying, and then it's like, oh, I don't know why we needed all of those words to indicate that, but I guess we do. There are irregular verbs. C. Davis. Eo is not actually one of them. The most irregular verb, the most common irregular verb I can think of is the verb to be, which I think is irregular in pretty much every language I have ever encountered. Even though it is irregular in terms of its forms, in its conjugation, it still is fairly regular. It just looks a little bit different than sort of your other standard verbs. Because even when Latin is irregular, it's still shockingly regular, if that somehow makes sense. Verbs that tend to get used a lot tend to mutate more quickly than verbs that don't get used as often, which is why the verb to be is often so irregular, because it just gets used so much. And we have another example. In principio creavit Deus caelum et terram. And we can look at this. In principio. In, of course, is in. Principio is a second declension, ablative singular. It's functioning as a prepositional phrase here, in the beginning. Creavit, third person, singular, perfect, active, indicative, created. A singular being created in the beginning. Deus, God. In the nominative, so we know that's the subject. And our objects, the things being acted upon, are caelum and terram. Caelus is the sky, terram, the earth, terra, familiar with that. Et is one of multiple ways to say and. Latin is one of the handful of languages I know with like 3 or 4 different ways to say and. Fun fact of the day. We are full of fun facts today, I think. So when you put these things together, we have this prepositional phrase in the beginning. God created the things being acted upon the sky and the earth. Another example, this is colorful because it has clauses. Again, we see in principio, same prepositional phrase in the beginning. Our word here is no longer perfect, it's imperfect. It's the third person singular imperfect active indicative of that pesky to be verb sum esse fui futurus. Erat is the imperfect, can translate it as was. We have a nominative, we have the subject of this clause, the word. In the beginning was the word. Second clause in yellow. Et, again, and. Verbum is that nominative again, so and the word. Erat was. Apud is another preposition indicating to be with, to dwell with. Apud, and it goes with Deum, which is the accusative of God, so and the word was with God. And again, et. Then we can literally just piece the rest of this together. And the word, verbum, was God. They're both the subject because they are, in this case, the same thing. These are probably 3 of the most famous Latin phrases that are complete sentences and not things like I came, I saw, I conquered, or the die has been cast. I've just talked to you guys for a good 45 minutes straight. I would assume there are questions. Please feel free to ask them. I realize it's a lot of information and not everyone is familiar with grammatical concepts or may not have been exposed to inflected languages. So please, if you think of something, please ask it. Bueller? Bueller?
Sorry, it took me a second to unmute my microphone. I have a question. Oh, there's a question on the chat.
There's a question. What are these 6 tenses again? These 6 tenses, let's go back to that. I'm just gonna go back here. Tense. The present, the future, the perfect, the pluperfect, the imperfect, and the future perfect. In case you were not here earlier, Val, I will be leaving a link to this presentation, which also works as your class handout, so you can take that and read it and reread it and think of things to ask, because I am happy to continue to Latin at people outside of this class. 6 tenses, does that help? Great. I am glad to hear it.
You had said earlier that word order doesn't matter.
Yes.
Is there ever meaning encoded in word order, or is it purely whichever order you felt like stringing the words together?
I don't know if you were here for me to briefly mention that you can use word order for emphasis, but if you put the verb at the very beginning or the very end of a sentence or a clause, it can heighten meaning. This does actually change when you get to medieval Latin, where you start seeing something resembling an actual syntax rather than the rules are made up and the points don't matter.
And when would you say that medieval Latin starts to be a thing?
medieval Latin. I wish I had fixed this date in my head. Jerome, so Vulgate Biblical Latin, is still classical. Byzantium, of course, spoke Greek. I would say, I mean, like, I personally would start calling it, like, by the end of the Western Roman Empire is when you start getting into medieval Latin, but I am, of course, a hard classicist, and I get a little snobby sometimes. But I will look into that and check my dates. Declining doing verbs. Romani epidomum. I apologize for all of this. I didn't actually learn how to do sentence diagrams in any of my Latin or English classes. But in case this hasn't scared you off and you want to learn or practice more, I have some resources and some fun things. For books, I cannot recommend enough Wheelock's Latin, which is probably one of the standard college Latin textbooks for beginners as well as intermediate students. I also am very fond of the Cambridge Latin course, which is honestly like meant for middle and high school students, but it's engaging. You learn to translate and understand the language through stories about people during a particular period, which I think is kind of cool, and you get sort of like glimpses into culture as well. For dictionaries, it is hard to go wrong with the Pocket Oxford Latin Dictionary. The non-Pocket Oxford Latin Dictionary is about 1 million volumes, and it's very heavy and gets into etymology. If you're that kind of nerd, maybe your local library has a copy. I don't know. I wouldn't buy one myself, though. But the Pocket one is good. The Bantam New College and Latin English Dictionary is great. If you're looking for an online source that's very simple and very sort of beginner friendly, latindictionary.net/search. That's one I tend to use a lot. My one caveat to latindictionary.net is that sometimes you have to hunt around for the word with the exact shades of meaning you're looking for. With 1,000 years of history, Latin has a lot of words that mean a lot of different things, much like English, despite English's much shorter history. If you're looking for actual Latin texts to read, even if you don't necessarily want to know what they mean, if you're just wanting to practice pronouncing the language or getting used to seeing how it's written, the Loeb Classical Library is one of the gold standards. The Latin books have sort of this weird orangey red cover. Greek books have green covers, so don't get the green ones. Perseus Digital Library, which is run again by Tufts University. We can just search Perseus Tufts and it'll bring you to the right place. And then Lacus Curtius Online, which I believe, I'm going to check that real fast. I believe it's run by the University of Chicago. I'm going to check that real fast. Yeah, University of Chicago. Also very good. They have a lot of texts in translation as well. And if you want some fun things, these teal ones, these are all links. So when I do send you the link to this presentation, you can click on those and watch YouTube videos to your heart's content. The first two are done by a linguist's YouTube channel. The channel is called Native Lang. He did a video on how we know what classical Latin sounded like. And he also did a Latin grammar playlist comparing and contrasting grammar of classical and medieval Latin. It's pretty cool. Or if you are into something more fun and more lighthearted, or you have small children who want to get perhaps into this language, Scorpio Martianus is a proponent of living spoken Latin, and he has done a whole bunch of videos about names for family members, or all sorts of things. What I really know him for is that he has done several translations and performances of popular Disney songs in Latin. He's done Under the Sea from Little Mermaid. He did What's This from The Name Before Christmas. He did You're Welcome from Moana. He has one or two others, but they're really, really well done, and they are a lot of fun. Who doesn't love fun? Any questions? Otherwise, I've just rambled at you for an hour. Music, since a lot of religious music is in Latin. Are there examples of classical Latin music I'm aware of? So the Disney Latin songs are in a link in the handout, which now that I'm thinking about it, I'm just gonna stop presenting so you can see my lovely face and I can see all of your lovely faces. And I will post that link right now. Get a shareable link. We're gonna copy that, and I am posting the link to the presentation in the chat. Please let me know if that doesn't work. The Disney Latin songs are on the last slide. It's the last one on the fun stuff. The guy's name is Scorpio Martianus. I would love to meet this man and shake his hand. I really hope I haven't made people's eyes glaze over. Oh, thank you. Are there any questions? Because I'm happy to answer those. If you want more examples for things, I can give those as well. I am here to be a resource. It's my pleasure, guys. If you're looking for more information, there is a Latin for Medieval Reenactors group on Facebook, which I'm a part of. They're also pretty great. Yeah, Latin's wonderful, and I encourage many much Latins. Oh, but in reference to the classical Latin music, we don't have a lot of it. I actually don't think we have any. We have extant texts of poems. The word for poem and song is the same, and we know that some poetry was recited with the accompaniment of the lyre. That's lyric poetry. But we don't necessarily, as far as I'm aware, have much in the way of notation or knowing what the music actually sounded like. Usually when people are looking for like classical Mediterranean music, the thing I usually point them towards is actually in Greek, which is the Scholion of Seikilos, one of the oldest pieces of written music we have in the Western world. It's pretty neat. There is a musical group out of Europe called Synaulia, Synaulia. They try to reconstruct historic Roman music. We aren't really sure if it's accurate or not. It's experimental archaeology at its finest, I would say. I hope that answers the question.
There is some music in the works of Boethius, who is at the edge of classical.
Also, I guess, Boethius. Yay. Well, thank you all so much for attending this class. I hope you learned things, and I hope I have not left you with a head full of fluff. Yay, people coming to a class. Yeah.
So where will we find the link for your the presentation?
It should be in the chat.
Okay, that's all the presentation slides that you did?
Yep, it's all in one document.
Okay, because my daughter loves Latin. She took it quite a few times in high school, didn't really do very well, but now really wants to learn Latin.
Oh.
So, but
Yeah.
she's working right now, so I'm trying to figure out how to find this in the recording so that she can watch this later.
Yeah, so the recording will turn up on the East Kingdom YouTube channel. I don't know when it will be posted, but when it is, absolutely free. Feel free to share it and that handout with her or anyone else.
Okay, and if she has any questions, you're on Facebook or?
I am, yes. I am Rachel Simon on Facebook. I'm in the Latin for Medieval Reenactors group. I'm in the unofficial East Kingdom group. I hail from the Barony of Carolingia. Or if you even just post on like the online arts and sciences virtual classroom, be like, hey, could that person who taught the Latin class come find me? I have a question. I am here to help.
Okay, I will let her know. Thank you very much.
You're very, very welcome.
The hyperlinks on the last slide of the presentation are not letting anybody click through.
Oh no. I will.
Or maybe it's just me. I don't know.
Let's see a thing.
No, I am not getting a link either.
Okay, I will post those all individually in the chat then. I apologize for that. So that's the first one, how we know what Latin sounded like. Have a second one, which is a Latin grammar playlist. And
I was able to right click on the link and tell it to open in a new tab, and it opened up and I can see all of your slides there.
Great. That in case anyone is having issues with those links, I also put them in the chat for perusal at your leisure. You're very, very welcome. It's my pleasure. I am actually, when all of this plague business is finished with, I am thinking about going back to school to become a high school Latin teacher. So congratulations. You are all volunteer guinea pigs for my first Latin class.
Again, I just want to say from the MOAS office, thank you so much for teaching this. This was a really wonderful class. If anyone else is interested in teaching, we would love to have more classes. We have lots more coming up, but seriously, this was so cool. Thank you so, so, so much.
You are so very welcome. And if I don't know if you'll never need me to do it again, but if you need me to do it again, I can do it again.
Wonderful, thank you. I will turn off recording now.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.